Hello, I'm Mark Murphy. I'm the Chief Executive of Cancer Support Suffolk, and today I'm at Bridge Classic Cars. But we're not talking today about classic cars, but we might as the afternoon goes on. I want to talk to Gordon, who's the director of Bridge. And Gordon, why have you brought me here today?
I brought you here today because one member of staff was diagnosed with cancer some 5 or 6 weeks ago, and just through that I started reflecting just myself of what it meant to me and the people I know, past and sort of future and present, that has been affected with cancer. So that was the reason we all got together today. And people have come.
So many people, isn't it? So many people now.
There is, and people have come today. They've come from quite a long way to support this.
And it's something that's very personal to you as well, isn't it?
It is, yeah. In 2019, I was diagnosed with hairy cell leukemia. I had chemotherapy in 20, and it makes you reflect on your life. That was the first thing, really. And it affects all the people around you as well, who have to be very, very supportive while you're going through it. But as I say, I then started to think about people who have passed through my life. And I thought it'd be good to mention those people. And as I say, the support's been really, really good for all the people who've come today, who are all have a story to tell.
Well, we'll talk to those in a moment or two, but just mention the people that you've lost who mean so much to you, because people will relate to this, because we've all lost someone to cancer in our lives.
And I think that's definitely the thing. I think when you speak about it, it will sound like I really, really know a lot of people that this has affected, but everybody knows a lot of people that this affects. When I went through my treatment, I was absolutely amazed. I went to Wolverston Ward in Ipswich, and the machines, walls and walls of machines, and chemotherapy for half an hour, 2 hours, and the seat is never empty. So it's really, really important, again, that we support hospitals, the NHS, what they give us and what we expect from them. So touching my life, my mum, who's no longer with us, she had a double mastectomy. My sister had bowel cancer. Her husband, Tony, had skin cancer, and he's going through that now. So my wife, Eva, lost both of her brothers in the last few years. One this year, Billy and John, who both had very, very short illnesses, and both died of cancer. I worked in Scotland prior to being here, and a 25, 30-year-old friend, we were cooking tea one night, and he was leaning up against the wall in pain, and I sort of said to him, what's the matter? And he said, I've got a bad back. I said, well, you ought to get that seen to, really. Yes, okay, but he didn't. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, same scenario, but this time his knees were bent and he was halfway down the wall, like in a sitting position without a chair. Still got the bad back. He ended up going to hospital. He phoned me the following day and said, I've got bowel cancer. 3 weeks later, he was dead. He was getting through his wife, Caroline, having a double mastectomy. So again, very, very prevalent that these people had gone through that. And as I said then, sort of five or 6 weeks ago, an employee, friend, was diagnosed with lung cancer. He had come to us beginning of the week and said he got pains in his chest. And I said, we all ought to get checked. So I said, you ought to go, heart, at a certain age. He said, yes, he was going to go and do that. And then the following weekend, I think, or the weekend after, no doubt he'll tell you a little bit himself, that he had a bit of trouble breathing. So again, linking to heart, he went to the doctors. They sent him straight to Papworth. He had some fluid around his heart and lungs. They took that fluid away, diagnosed it, and unfortunately, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. He's now got to go through the chemo. And I want to say a little bit about the chemo as well, because the chemo, I mean, when you mention chemotherapy, everybody really, really panics. And it's not a good thing to go through. But it's also been developed so much now that it's not to be scared.
It's much more targeted now,
it is.
isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
And I felt quite guilty when I was going through. My chemo was quite intense, so it was 6 lots in 6 days, 7 lots in 7 days, whatever it was. People were phoning me in the evening and saying, "How are you?" And I didn't want to answer them because I thought the following day I'm not going to be well, but I was well, and I didn't suffer with having the chemotherapy at all. We can all joke that I wasn't ever going to have hair loss, but apart from that, it was not onerous. And when you talk to your nurse who you're allocated to, they go through it and they say
They're fabulous, aren't they?
Yeah, they absolutely are. And they say it sometimes doesn't have any effect on people. And also the drugs behind it, the anti-sickness drugs, all that sort of thing. That's all there for you. And it's not a walk in the park. It's scary, but we get through it. But as I say, today there's been a lot of people who've come here to support this. They've come from Devon, they've come from Nuneaton.
These are all people you know?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, friends, work colleagues, and also a couple of the wives have come to
And so important to talk about experiences, because if it encourages someone to go and get screened, or if they're not feeling right, to go and get checked out. That's what this is about, isn't it?
Well, I think a lot of people, find out through another reason. It's not because they're screened. It's not because the screen is not available, but you don't go to the doctors and you don't say this and you don't say that. So, from my point of view, I had pains in my hands and pains in my shoulders, and I thought it was like, because I'm 60 odd years old, I thought, well, it's old age, that's what it is. We're all living longer, So you tend to just brush that under the carpet. When you go and they diagnose it, there's no, you're like a rabbit in the headlights, and you go home and reflect on what you've just been told and what's going to be coming up in front of you.
It's a scary conversation,
very
isn't it?
much so. Yeah, it is. It is very scary.
But the more that we can demystify what's going on, the better. Do you want to introduce me to a few of your friends who have come today?
Yeah, of course I will. Yeah,
Let's go and wander over and see.
Yeah.
My goodness, everybody who's here today, all people that you know, all people that have had experiences like yours, or the partner of someone who's had experiences.
Well, as I said before, I was down here full time. I was working in Scotland, and I met Faisal, and he came to site to give me some assistance. We got talking because, as you said, cars were a big thing. Yep. It's a big thing in Faisal's life as well. But it was a conversation with Faisal, and it said what he'd been through. And if you wanna say what you've been through,
my story isn't as bad as or as worse as some of these people here. But when I had pain in my just below my belly, really. And I didn't take much notice of it. So I was like, yeah, everyone gets pain, exercise, whatever. It was only after I come back from Bulgaria snowboarding where I felt this lump. Now, it wasn't big. Moving forward a bit, after they took a biopsy, opened me up. They had a screen in front of me whilst they opened me up. But I could see the reflection of what they were doing. So I said, move this finger away, because I want to see what's going on. As they took it out, I just shouted out, "Oh, it's a boy." But they'd done the biopsy, turned out to be non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And at first, when they told me what it was, it didn't hit me. I don't still think that it has hit me. It's been 5 years since since it come out. Because my health was great and I was living life as I was. So it didn't really bother me as much. But now looking back at it, I didn't tell anyone at the time. Didn't tell my parents, didn't tell my siblings. My wife knew, but I think looking back at it, I wish I did tell people just to get the support. Gordon was one of the very few people that I did tell.
So how important do you think it is to get support when you're going through this, rather than, as you did it, pretty much on your own?
Very important. I think mentally, you need that support from your loved ones, your friends, your family. And some of your friends and family have already been through it. And you've got to take experience. You've got to take that knowledge from their experiences. I don't think I did that. So, yeah, it's important that you do that.
but would you also say that once you've had it, then it does make you more likely to go to the doctors, because it does You
Oh,
know,
yes.
if I've got something wrong with me now, I go to the doctor. I don't sit there and think. I'd rather be told that there's not something than is something.
No, 100%. I think anything now.
What would you say to anybody watching today who's perhaps got a niggle somewhere or something's not right? What would you say to them?
Yeah, go to the doctors, get it checked out, and if it is something, then talk to friends and family. I think that was my biggest mistake.
Well, thank you for sharing. I mean, it's so important to share, and I know we've got other stories here as well.
Yeah,
today,
yeah.
haven't we?
One of my best friends is Carl, and what happened with Carl was, we lose a lot of people, and Carl was diagnosed with cancer. I'll let him tell his story, but his story is not one where it was an instant success. So, Carl, tell us about it.
What happened was I was out on a jolly at Cheltenham Races, and we were drinking beer, and every time I went to the toilet, somebody I knew was stood at the side of me. And this went on, and then during the afternoon, he said to me, "Have you ever had your PSA checked?" I went, "What's PSA?" It's a little blood test, takes a couple of minutes, and it'll just give you an idea of how things are going on. And I said, "Well, how do you know?" He said, "Because I've got prostate cancer." So booked into the doctors, had a PSA check, and the numbers weren't humongous, but they were above what the GP thought was a satisfactory requirement. So from there, that progressed into going to see a consultant, having some biopsies and scans, various different scans, and it proved to be prostate cancer. After the treatment, we decided that's enough of work in Worcestershire, and we set course for Devon. 7 years later, I went to have a PSA check, and the numbers have started increasing again. So that makes it slightly more difficult to remove the prostate after having radiotherapy. It's a difficult procedure. So I was through the NHS, sent down to Guy's Hospital, met a consultant, had the prostate removed, and I'm still on a 3-month PSA check, and I'm really happy that my results, touch wood, come back at 0.01.
Wow, that's really
which
low.
is pretty much as low as the machine can read. And I just thank everything and everybody involved. And it's all about friends, family, and the professionals. That's my story.
How are you feeling now?
Okay. I still nip to the toilet, drink a bit, go to the toilet, but that's because that's what it is. So I do pelvic exercises, which is an app on your phone. It makes it all so very, very easy to do.
It's what you said earlier, Gordon, isn't it? When you get to a certain age, you think, oh, well, I'm going to the loo a bit too often, but that's just old age, isn't it?
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, definitely.
But it pays to get it checked, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Reiterating my faces, you need family and friends and people who have been through similar things who could give you advice. And I think it's out there. I think you've just got to look for it.
There's a lot out there.
There's a huge amount out there.
Well, I think with both of us, I mean, our wives got us through it, really, because, I mean, it was a little bit of a hard time after my chemo. I had a bit of a setback, but that setback was, my wife just was 100% on that setback all the time, even when I couldn't be. So you've got to have that. So,
And I think that's important to mention that, is your loved ones. So somebody will phone up and say to your wife, "How's Carl?"
yeah.
I think sometimes your friends and family need to say, "How are you?" and speak to your wife or your husband, you know?
They're on the journey with you, aren't they?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And sometimes we forget. I'd phone Eva and say, "How's Gordon?" Not, "How are you doing?" Which is what we always think about the patient,
Yeah.
not the patient's carer.
Who else are we going to talk to, Gordon?
Well, along the classic car route, I think we will stay on the table, but along the classic car route, you have customers, some awkward, some lovely. Here's one of the awkward ones. I built a car for this gentleman, and he came and and became a friend. And Derek has gone through a very, very similar thing to Carl. And I have, before I go on to Derek, I have another friend who I failed to mention earlier. I should, because he wanted to be here today and he couldn't be because he's actually in hospital on a different note, and that's Dick Roper. And he's gone through exactly the same again. The amount of men that go through the prostate cancer problem is obviously a big thing. So I wish Dick all the best. But Derek, would you like to tell us what you
I was actually very lucky. I was on holiday and I had a really invasive urinary tract infection, which couldn't shift it with antibiotics. And I ended up having to go and see a urologist. And he was convinced it was just an infection. And I had horse strength antibiotics for about a month and still had probably the symptoms of almost every internal cancer you can think of. That actually is the worst bit, because I think I went through about 7 or 8 different scans of different descriptions, and actually the going through the tests and waiting for the results, I have to say, was worse than the treatment. I mean, that really, and it went on for about 4 months, 3-4 months. So when he actually told me he thought I had prostate cancer, then had a biopsy, it almost came as a relief, because the number of other things it could have been were considerably worse. But it was aggressive enough to be likely to spread quite quickly. So if I hadn't actually got an infection, the first time I would have actually known about this was when it would actually have gone too far. So the difficulty is, when do you have a PSA test? Because do you have it when you're 50, 60, 70? And a very good pal of mine was diagnosed almost exactly the same time. And they all went down to the local village hall for a mobile test. And he said, we're all laughing and joking because none of us had a problem. He's the same age as me, middle 70s. And he was just amazed to get the call. And his had spread and still no symptoms at all. Now, he caught it in time, but I think really the message for me is more, you got to be preemptive with some of those things, which wasn't in my culture before, I have to say. No problem, drinking beer, everything's fine. Why would I go for a test? Perhaps I didn't even know about a test. I mean, I sort of intellectually knew about it, but in reality, why would I go today? And frankly, if I hadn't had that infection and hadn't had a test, I was probably going to have significantly shortened my life.
The number of people who are being diagnosed with cancer now is 1 in 2.
Yeah.
And that's sounds an horrific figure. Used to be 1 in 4. But what's happening, of course, we're living longer. Some of the things that would have seen us off before are being sorted now, so we're living longer. And I think a lot of us men will die with prostate cancer, not from prostate cancer. Do you think there should, the two of you, do you think there should be some kind of screening program?
Absolutely.
If I went back in time, I would have a test.
Yeah.
Yes, even knowing the randomness. And
Yeah.
I do believe there's actually an improvement in the testing regimes that are on their way.
How does it feel, the three of you sitting there together, and we'll come to your other friends in a moment and family, but how does it feel, the three of you sitting together talking so openly like this? Have you done anything like it before?
No.
Talked like this before?
No.
Is it cathartic? Is it good for you to talk like this?
If just one person goes and gets checked and, like you say, didn't have any symptoms, and then can start that journey of recovery, I think that's most important.
Well, I can tell you what you're doing today is hugely important for other people who are watching this isn't it, today.
definitely.
Who else have we got here then, Gordon?
Well, I think the next thing is quite interesting, really, because we're not a big company. We have about 22, 23 people. And we've got Alan over there, who is one of my painters. We got Rob, who works in the media side of the business. And then we've got Brian, who's the second half of the trimming kit. If you want to kick off, Alan, and tell them what you've been through. And
yeah, well, for me, this goes back quite a few years. I had pains sort of around my appendix area. Lasted a few days. Someone actually mentioned to me, it might be your appendix. So I was just on the point of going to the doctors, went away, never had it again. Move on like 4 or 5 years. Middle of the night, I'm starting to get severe cramps in my legs, in my calf muscles. And I checked it out and I saw, it could be statins. I'd just been put on them. So I went getting to the doctor thinking, oh, I'll just go in there, get them changed, and that'd be it. And he happened to ask me, he said, how are your bowel movements? And I went, now you said that, they're not right. And he said, right, I'm going to send you off for a colonoscopy. And therein started 3 months. So for me, going to the doctors, 3 months later, I'm having part of my bowel removed through bowel cancer.
Do you wish you'd have gone to the GP earlier?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, because I do think, because at the time when the doctor came out after the colonoscopy, he told me what they'd found. And I started to realise it was starting to get serious because they gave me, straight away, they gave me a specialist nurse. And I'm thinking, would it have been an easier procedure if I'd gone when I had the first lot of pains? That would have been probably 6-7 years earlier.
We'll never know, but it could well have been, couldn't it?
Yeah, I would never know. But yeah, I can't complain because, I say, 3 months. It didn't give me time to really think about it either. I had my family around me, and it happened so quick, I just didn't have time to really take it in what was going on. I think it sort of hit me when I had my pre-op assessment, and I just happened to say to one of the nurses about it, a blood test, and she said, oh, we've got to make sure we've got enough blood for you just in case we have to do a transfusion. And that's when it started to hit home at how serious this had become.
Who else have we got around this table?
We've got Rob. I know very little about Rob. I know a lot about Rob, but I don't know much about his condition. So this will be interesting for me as well.
It's interesting, Rob, isn't it? Because when we heard about your colleague's diagnosis here, you kind of put your hand up, didn't you, and said, I've been on a journey as well. What was yours?
So it was probably, I think it's 6-7 years ago, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. I think I was about 26, 27. And at the time I was fresh out of a career in fitness. I was a personal trainer, fitness manager, all that, so really fit and healthy. Looking back at speaking to my doctors, I don't think I'd even walked into a GP surgery for about 10 years. It was, and I just got out of the shower one day, and I didn't check myself. I'd never even considered it. It was only when my now wife noticed, even from across the room, she was like, "That's interesting," and then I just remember then kind of examining myself and thinking, yeah, that's not right. But even then, at that point, I think I said to her, I'll see how I am next week, and then I'll go to the doctor. And it was only because she encouraged me to go to the doctor the next day. So from going to the doctor to surgery was only 9 days. So in that time I had ultrasound, CT scans, loads of blood tests. I had a liver function test. So basically I was at the hospital every single day. It was then I had to make a decision about if I wanted kids in the future. Do I need to, store things and everything else? And it's just something I'd never considered. So going through all that, and then so I had surgery to remove one of my testicles, and then I had chemotherapy after that. And I think at the time of the ultrasound, there was very little non-cancerous tissue left. But like I said before, I hadn't really considered it. A week before I went to the doctors, I'd done a tandem skydive that someone had got me for Christmas. It never entered my mind that, and even when I examined myself and noticed something was not right, it didn't even come into my mind that it was going to be anything other than, if I'm honest, my first thought was, the harness when I did a skydive just pulled up and bruised me or something. It was never an option. But yeah, so 9 days between that first doctor's appointment and surgery, and then I was fortunate that I only needed one round of chemo. But you then go on to, as we all know here, the kind of checkup cycle. So every month for a while I was going up the hospital, every 3 months, and I'm now at my yearly point. So once a year I have to have a CT scan, and I have to go see my doctor or my consultant at the hospital for blood tests, examinations and everything else. But I think for me, I think some of us have alluded to it already. For me, physically, I didn't feel too bad after. You know, there was a wound that needed to be looked after, but other than that, physically, I was okay. But it was probably my mental health that took the biggest hit.
It's a shock even today with all of the improvements and treatment and everything. When you have that diagnosis, that's a shock, isn't it?
Yeah, completely. You know, and I think, you know, since that diagnosis, I've struggled a lot more with anxiety. You know, I spent a year talking to a therapist every week, and even then, it was kind of 6 months in before it came up that I actually had cancer. You know, and it all kind of came together from then. But you know, even talking to someone in that safe space, you know, I think I used to tell them I was poorly or I've been poorly. I never actually said that, you know, I had cancer, and it's only very, very recently that, you know, I've started probably accepting it. I was very good at distracting myself. So, you know, oh, it's done, it's over now, but actually it's not quite, just on a different stage of the journey to the other people there, I think. So.
And Brian now is just about to go on the journey. So over to you, Brian, and tell us what you can.
Just a few days before we break up for Christmas, I noticed when I walked from my car to here, I was getting pain in my chest. But I wasn't out of breath or nothing like that. And as soon as I stopped, I was okay. If I walked short distances in here, didn't feel nothing. So I thought, well, I'll leave it over Christmas. And then it was still there after Christmas. So I went to the doctors, and they told me to go up to Ipswich for an X-ray. That showed something on my lungs, which they thought was like a chest infection. So I went back to the doctors, they gave me some pills for that. And then later that week, I was actually getting out of breath, just going upstairs. And it got to the point where I couldn't sleep. And then I fell out of bed and cracked my head. So then I thought, right, I've got to do something about this. So went to the doctors again. She said, you know, you really need to go to A&E. So my neighbours took me up there, and while they were doing some checks, the doctor said, well, you need to go to Patworth, because that's their speciality. So I went there, and then they discovered I had a load of fluid on my lungs, which was kind of, because your lungs are in a bag, and it was like crushing them. That's why I couldn't breathe. So they did a chest drain and got rid of all that. And then obviously you have various scans, x-rays, and then they come back with lung cancer. So
there's a lot of positivity here about treatments. Does that help you when you hear the advances that are being made all the while, and these wonderful people who are telling their stories, colleagues who you work with every day, supporting you?
Same, you know, I was saying as Gordon, I never knew, because it's not something you bring up, is it? So.
From the other side of the fence, really, is Carl's wife and my wife is here today to just, if you like, finish off what we've been discussing.
You're just helpless because you can't do anything. You get this diagnosis and it's this word, but it's nothing to do with me. I can't do anything about it. It's my husband, yourself, who's going through it. And it's not just obviously Gordon going through it or me being his wife. He's also got a son, Craig, obviously, who's part of the business, and he's got a daughter as well, called Karen. And again, you know, we can't actually do anything. We can't help Gordon. We can be there for him. But I think the thing which was a little bit more difficult for the children more than anything else was the fact that Gordon's diagnosis was in COVID. So of course we were isolating, so there was the telephone and that sort of thing. I think it was more hard for the kids, the more it was for me and Gordon, because we had each other to bounce off. But we just taken it literally month by month. But I think for us, it's your journey. We're there for you, and we want to help as much as we can. And I think the thing I found quite moving today is all of you guys, you know, we as women, we talk about things like, you know, getting smear tests and, you know, mammograms and this sort of thing. And we just talk about it like shell and peas. And it's brought to the forefront that for you guys, you need to just talk about these things like we do. And when we have smears, you should be having PSI tests. It should be just the norm. And hopefully it will get that way and it'll be much, much nicer.
I think you underestimate the support. You say you're helpless and that sort of thing. We're appreciative of everything that went on in the background. Do you think so, Carl?
Absolutely. One thing that was really helpful to us was when I had the radiotherapy, the nurses took my wife into the room to show her the unit and the bed that I lay on. So she had an understanding.
So when do you think you underestimate? I mean, as I say, after I'd had my chemo, a couple of weeks later, I did go through a hard time. And when I was waking up, every time there, so.
It's important to share if you can, isn't it? I think it really is. And it's difficult for some blokes, isn't it, to do that, to open up. I know someone very recently that I came into contact with whose partner has cancer, and he's really, really struggled. And he didn't open up to anybody because it was felt that he had to be the strong one. He had to be the strong one. He was a squaddy, everybody expected him, but he needed help and support as well. And what's your experience of being with Carl and going through that journey with him?
The biggest comfort we have is that we've talked about it a lot and all the decisions were made jointly.
And so you discussed it completely with each other?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Joint decisions?
And you can see by Leslie's reaction how it still affects even today. And I'm on the good side of it. But again, as I say, I think if your mental health and your well-being, if you share it.
I really felt helpless because normally if Carl's got a problem, I could fix it all through our married life. And all of a sudden, I can't fix it for him, which that made it like, oh dear, and so, like I said, we discussed it, we spoke to all the 3 adult children that we have between us, and they were so supportive.
I think that's the same for husbands and male partners, for women who are diagnosed, Mark. I think it's that helplessness. I mean, you know people, we all know people, and you want to help. But you can be there for mental support and everything else, but that person's going on their individual journey. And listening today, I'm just in awe of how strong these people are.
Brian, I hope you've taken from this today, the strength and positivity of these people here who've been on the journey that you're on. And that's a really important thing, isn't it? To have that kind of positive feeling. Advances in medical treatments are, happening every week. How do you feel about sharing your stories today?
I feel that we're in an exclusive club, and it's just, and I feel warmed. Personally, I feel comfortable around you guys. From what you've said, and the pains in your chest, and what Brian said, I'm gonna check myself.
What was almost missing for me was a message that said, don't wait till you've got these symptoms.
A proper screening program, don't we? Come in.
It's something like that, because as far as I was concerned, if I went on and looked at prostate cancer website, list of things, none of those. So why would I?
With what I had, there was 11 markers, and there was only 4 of them that were ticked. But he said to me, you could have come literally with 10 or 11 and still not felt ill, but you would not have recovered. So I think again, it is
screening does seem to be
screening, early diagnosis, looking after your bodies, so that if you do
have to
go through cancer treatment, when Brian, a fit man, looking after yourself, because it is tough going through radiotherapy, chemotherapy, but the healthier, the better you look after yourself, the better your body will respond to the treatment, and your recovery is much quicker. I mean, you must know that as a fitness guy.
Yeah. Well, I think as well, the self-examinations, because when it was pointed out to me that something didn't look right, it was clearly, obviously not right, but I hadn't noticed it. And I don't know how long it was there for, I can tell you, because I just never checked. Yeah. So even though I had the signs and the symptoms, it just didn't even dawn on me to ever check. You know, it's
And I think we're all different as well. You know,
Yeah.
hearing you all speak, you all, you know, it's not one size fits all, is it? It's, you know, there's so many different variations of cancer. You know, so many different things that could be, you know, affecting your testicles. You know, it's important to go and get things looked at if something isn't right, and regular checks as well. I mean, Wellman checks, for instance. You know,
It needs to be regular because there's no point going when you're 55 and not going again. I mean, that's the difficulty.
You could talk to people openly. We could have a laugh and joke about it as well. So yeah, it's been great.
I think what's happened in generations before, whenever the big C was mentioned, cancer, everybody started talking in. Can't talk about that.
Yeah.
You know, and we have to. You know, it's no different to having, you know, a mental health issue. We need to be talking about that much more. You know, we talk about it. We're open and talking about it, and I think we need to do that for cancer as well. So, Gordon, thank you on behalf of everybody here and everybody who's watching. This was your idea. I think it's been really powerful today. So, thank you for inviting us to Bridge. Brian, we're all with you. A lot of love and support for you as well on your journey, which is coming up. And if at Cancer Support Suffolk we can help you in any way going forward, you know where I am. But from Bridge Classic Cars, I think, well done everybody, and thanks very much indeed.
Thanks very much.
Absolute pleasure.
Cheers.
Keep strong, everybody.